My daughter would come home when she was 12 and she would say, Ban is dating who, and she's feeling the pressure. And I'm like, 12 years old.
You have no idea.
No, I was shocked. 12 years old, right? And what does a 12-year-old know about themselves?
Good day, viewers. Hope you are well. My name is Yanda Sondlo, and welcome to the segment of this podcast, which is Intentional Parenting. In this segment, we speak all things parenting and how to build good relationships with our children. Indeed, there is no school for parenting, there's no book for parenting. We are all just trying to wing it. So, as we navigate this journey, I'll be having a few guests. So this week, my guest is Thandi Domingo. She's very skilled in these matters. She's a wife, mother of 10, as she says, an author, and a life coach. Thandi, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you.
So I discovered you on social media of the
Yeah.
work that you are doing. Can you just briefly tell us about yourself and the work you do and what's the inspiration behind it?
Okay. So the work I do is that I'm a life coach. I'm also a teacher of God's word. So really my life coaching is very intersectional with my faith. How did I get into life coaching? So I worked for corporate for a very, very long time. And in corporate, I realized, I'm always the girl that people are coming to with problems. And I was like, but I'm employed to do invoicing. But I'm sitting here talking to people about their problems. And that was really my passion. And that's where really the discovery came from. So I went to study for life coaching, qualified for it. And then later on, I think about 3-4 years later, I started specifically niching to single, co-parenting, and blended families because that was my reality. And it was a reality that didn't work at some point, and then it started working like a well-oiled machine because of certain principles that I had put in place for it. And then as I put those principles in place, people started becoming interested in how I do co-parenting because it looked cute. It looked like I want this too, you know. And then I started focusing on really channeling my coaching to single co-parenting and blended families. So yeah, that's how it started.
Okay. So, as you say, there's certain principles that you put in place so that you can have this cute co-parenting. What are some of the sacrifices you needed to go through for it to be the way it is? Because co-parenting is it's not always a well-oiled machine. There must be sacrifices. Somebody must make the sacrifice for the parenting to be fine and for us to reach the goal. The goal is to have a healthy child with a healthy childhood. Yeah. So what were the sacrifices and some of the principles that you needed to stand on for that to work?
So I think the biggest principle was allowing my ego to die, right? Because for a second, I was the crazy baby mama. And I was intentional. I was intentional about being the crazy baby mama. But I looked at my child and I wondered, is it worth it? You know, because I'm myself an adult who had an interrupted childhood. So I did not want that for my child. When I realized what it is that I was really trying to give to my child by being this crazy baby mama, I had to reconcile with myself whether that was in line with the values that I stood for or not. And I really did not want my child to grow up and have an interrupted childhood, you know, where I'm the crazy baby mama, and as a result, she can't see her father or she sees her father under my laws, you know, that are maybe sometimes unfair. So I had to make that decision because she's my firstborn. I had to make that decision for her to say, look, I don't want the child to have an interrupted childhood, so my ego must die. And one of the principles that I had to apply was the principle of fairness, because up until a certain moment, I wasn't operating with fairness. I was operating with my ego and I was operating with my word goes, right? And I think sometimes we women, we feel that because we are the ones that give birth, right? That biologically we are the nurturers, but we think that because of that, men can't do it either. Men can't be the ones that become nurturers, or they can't be ones that become even better parents than we are. And maybe that is coming also from a place of examples that we see in society. But I mean, I've got two biological children, right? And the one is a boy, and I've seen how his dad required of himself to grow up, right? And so he went and got therapy done. He healed his wounds and he prepared for that child. And I see how he parents him now as a result of having gone through the processes he needed to go through. And I know it is possible. I know it's just that we as parents, we don't require of ourselves to grow up. And so we run around the same issue, even this issue of, if I can mention that, of ukoki and kamu, you
Yes.
know. You look at that situation and you think, sure, guys, can we grow up?
Exactly.
Can we, and not one person, can we all, in the midst of this entire thing, grow up and understand that, and understand what's at stake, you know, because I am passionate about the Black family because I grew up mainly seeing dysfunctional Black families. And when I was going through this process of trying to co-parent initially with Shekina's dad, I used to say I'm doing it for Shekina. And then I grew up and I realized, no, I shouldn't do it for Shekina. I should do it for me, for Shekina's dad, for Shekina's legacy, you know, the entire family's legacy, you know. So if sometimes when we push the just for the child thing, then we forget about ourselves. We forget that we also need to heal. We also need to come into the fullness of who God created us to be. And, you know, so when I started initially things for Shekina, but then I realized, no, I want to do it for the Black family. I don't want to do it just for Shekina. The whole Black family must heal, meaning the men must heal, the fathers must heal, the mothers must heal, the women must heal.
Wow. So, as you said, there's a lot of dysfunctionality around us in society, and someone like you who took accountability and decided to heal so that you can have a well-oiled machine, co-parenting machine. I want to know, you said it was because of a parental malfunction. Did you have a parental malfunction when you were growing up?
Oh,
Like a childhood
absolutely.
malfunction?
Yes. I always say my childhood was interrupted because my dad shot my mom in front of my eyes and my brother's eyes,
Wow.
right? And I was 3, my brother was 4. So you can imagine already the trauma that
Oh
comes
my
with that.
God.
So my childhood was interrupted at that moment. Prior to that, I can remember here and there lovely moments of fun, right? After that, all I remember about my childhood is a child that's like really caring a lot, you know. And so had to deal with a lot of rejection. I had to deal with a lot of pain and trauma from that, from that thing that happened, you know, from that scenario that happened. And I remember just one of the things that I'm passionate about, right, is we really need to go to therapy. We really need to heal. And church is not therapy, right? It can be, but it is not. And when I was growing up, in the midst of that chaos and trauma, I never went to therapy. And nobody thought, you know, these children have been through a lot. Say to a psychologist. No, it was like, okay, this happened, sorry, come in and be, I don't even remember, sorry, actually. Come and be integrated into the extended family. And the extended family itself was dysfunctional, right? It had its own dysfunctionalities that were now being passed on top of the trauma that I had, right? So now I grow up, physically I'm grown up, but inside I'm still like a 3-year-old who's traumatized by her mother's passing at the hands of her father.
Wow.
So then I go through life like that. and and I'm the girl that meets a guy, and a guy says, "I love you" or "you're pretty," and it's the most exciting thing because where have I heard that before, right? So and you are expected to navigate through life as an adult because your body says you are an adult, but emotionally, I have no capacity to run my life, let alone a relationship. So a lot of what happened, I can really trace it back to my childhood.
Wow.
Yeah.
I'm so sorry for what you went through.
Thank you.
Oh my God.
Thank you.
So do you feel, Lisa Sohlagala, that what happened, did you feel like it was your burden to carry? Did you feel like what happened was now your burden to carry and you couldn't let it go? That's why it led you to what led you.
I think I think God allows certain things to happen to people, ne? And I came across a scripture that says, comfort others with the same comfort that you have received, right? I think when God allowed, I used to ask God a lot of questions when I was growing up, like, why me? Why do you love me? Do you whatever? And then as I was growing up, I realized, no, he loves me. And he loves me so much that he's chosen me to take on certain things. And he knows my capacity, right? And it is, I didn't feel like it was a burden. I just felt like, sure, there's an obligation for me to teach what I've learned and what I've healed from. There's an obligation because around me, and it didn't even start out with me saying that, it was with people coming to me and saying, hey, I went through this and that and this, and then it made me realize there's a need for my story to be told. There's actually a need for all of our stories to be told,
That's true.
in various capacities. But when I reconciled what had happened to me and how I healed from it, and watching how God did something different with my life, a life that was supposed to go a certain direction, and God just came and swept it to the right direction. And I feel a need to not be quiet about it and to comfort others with the same comfort that God has given me. God has given me a lot of wisdom on how to navigate myself out of what I created and what was created for me, and He's also given me the wisdom to chart a newness, a new path for myself in the midst of chaos, and God has given me a strange sense of resilience. I'm very resilient. Not Mbokoto like resilient, but river like resilient. How the river will just come across a rock and it will just find a way around the rock, knowing that all roads lead to the ocean ultimately. And I have that sense of resilience that it doesn't matter what happens to me, I know I will survive it. And all roads lead back to Jesus ultimately for me.
Wow. Before we get into intentional parenting, there's something as a coach, you say in one of the interviews, many interviews I've seen, you say the reason why baby mamas are crazy is because they didn't have a chance in their healing journey. They didn't have a chance to say, maybe I wanted to marry the guy, maybe I wanted a family for them. You find that most of the time it's baby mamas who take accountability and decide to heal and decide to build structure for the family. Do you think that is fair? Because I know life is not fair. God is not also not fair.
Look, I don't think it's fair, but at the same time, I'm aware of the power that God has given women. And I feel like we've used that power in many wrong ways in the past, and it's time for us to graduate in using that power differently, right? So I feel it's each and every person's responsibility to heal. Whether you're a baby mama or baby daddy, it's just unfortunate. It's mainly us who do the work of healing over men. We go to conferences, we go to therapy, we talk to one another, we cry and whatnot. What do men have? You know, do they, and even when they get together, they don't get together to hold each other accountable. They get together for sports, for, you know, superficial conversations mostly. I know there are men that get together to really hold each other accountable, but for the vast majority, that's not the case, you know, and it's maybe not fair, but I'd rather pin my life on what my strength is than wait for someone to validate whether it's fair for me to be doing what I'm doing or not. You get what I'm saying? That if you eventually get to a place of healing, good for you. But I'm not waiting for you to validate my journey. I'm going to go and get help for myself. Because ultimately, like, you came to this world by yourself.
That's true.
You're living this world by yourself. And we live our lives amongst people, but we really by ourselves playing for an audience of one. And I'd rather play for that audience, even if it means I look like a fool to you, right? Because I'm the one that's pushing the healing between us. I'm the one that's pushing the child to be seen. That's fine. Ultimately, I'm playing for the audience of one. I'm not playing for you.
Wow.
Yeah.
So do you receive a lot of pushback, you and Osnokulunga, for the work that you do and the awareness that you're trying to create around building healthy relationships? Because I know social media always goes abuzz. I've seen in the comment section, they're like, let's hear Isaac Lendota. Let's hear what the man is saying. Like, you are not, you're supposed to be crazy forever. Do you get pushback like, when I was Thandi uzenza ngcono, yazi, mara uzenza ngcono, why can't he do the work? If tables were turned, can he do what you did? Can he heal? Can he move on?
If tables were turned, can he move on? I don't know, and I don't care because it's not my journey, right? I'm responsible for me and my journey. And did we get pushback? I saw the comments, but I didn't see a lot of comments that are like that. But I've seen one or two saying, oh, I can't believe it. These women decided to forgive this guy and they moved on with their lives. And my question is, versus what? What was I supposed to do? Right? Was I supposed to remain in bitterness and not move on with my life? I meet a great guy who wants to marry me, but can't because I'm bitter. Like, was that supposed to be the trajectory of my life? You know, and also there's one comment specifically that I remember. I can't remember how she said it, and I'm going to paraphrase, right? But she said something about, oh, you guys must go to counseling. How can you forgive? How can you forgive a guy that you both were dating, etc.? And then I said to her, we really see the world as we are. You know, you see two women that shouldn't have done this, that shouldn't have forgiven, that shouldn't have healed, that shouldn't have moved on with their lives, right? That's what you see. We see God and His forgiveness and His hand on wanting the situation to be the way that it is, so that it can speak to other people, right? It can speak to other families to say, this is possible, this is doable. You know, and she said, yeah, no, we something about we make our lives revolve around the man. And my question is, if truly we made our lives revolve around the men, we would not have spoken to one another with no kulung. We would not have healed. We would not have said, listen, this is bigger than us. I know how we met, but this is bigger than us. We've got a child in the situation. We need to get our heads together. Despite what's happened to us, let's get our heads together and work for the purpose of this child. So the man was never the goal for us. You know, the child was the goal for us. The family, the entirety of the family became the goal also for us. So we are not, you know, when we decided to write the book, we knew that there are people that are going to come out and say such things. And we already prayed for those, you know, that God may heal them. But we also knew that there were other people that were going to see this and say, my goodness, my situation can change. And let me tell you, the testimonies that have come from those kind of people are much more than the ones that are saying, I could never. And by the way, I don't blame the I could nevers either, right? Because you must remember there's different reasons why people say I could never. Even I at some point said I could never. I was never interested in fixing it with them. I was never interested for a period of time. I was not interested. But it took God speaking to me to say, listen, you can either be this person and pass on the inheritance of anger onto your child, or I can teach you how to forgive the situation, how to forgive you, because I also had to forgive myself, right? It wasn't just him that needed to be forgiven. It's me also. I had to forgive myself for putting myself in positions where I was not valued, where I did not even know my value, right? So the pushback, I don't even look at it as pushback. I look at it and I see pain from people, and I see ego from people, and I know nothing will go right with pain that has not been addressed or ego that is allowed to fester, So then my compassion comes in to say, I pray that you have an encounter with the Lord Jesus that I've had an encounter with, so that he can also help you, through whatever it is that he needs to help you in.
Yeah, wow. Do you think there's enough preparation to be a parent? Do you think?
No, no.
Even if you can have the money, the resources, do you think do you think there's enough wisdom to be a good parent out there?
I think there's enough wisdom in terms of materials, right? Like resources, this podcast, books to read, seminars to attend. So I think there's an opening and awareness to, hey, we need to parent correctly here, right? But I think it's emerging. But I don't think in the past it was there. I think we were all just winging it. I mean, I remember when my daughter was born, I cried. When she came out, she was so beautiful, and I cried, and everybody thought I was crying because I was happy. I was crying because I was scared. I was scared the reality of that child versus how I treated pregnancy. Pregnancy was like, I don't know, I'm at a fashion show type thing, right? And I was just enjoying this belly and whatnot. The reality of a human being coming out of you and being responsible, you being responsible for that human being, and not just financially, emotionally, spiritually, that reality hit me in the labor room. And I cried so much because, and one of the reasons I was crying is I knew I was messed up. So I was like, so this girl has to pattern her life from my motherhood. I have no idea what I'm doing, first of all, with my own life, let alone now being her parent, right? And I remember just having a breakdown, a mental breakdown, 10 days after she was born. It was my birthday. It was my 30th birthday. And then I said, I need to go somewhere. And I went to church. It was a conference there. And I got to church and I just cried. I can't remember what they were saying, but I just laid on the floor and I cried for the duration of the service. Came home and I was okay. But then what I came out of church with was this impetus to really go find out what parenting is about, And in the journey of finding out what parenting is about, you are also contending with how you were raised, right? And you see the discrepancies or the dysfunctionality of how you were raised, looking at how you are raising your child. And sometimes you're still raising your child around the same people that raised you, right? So I had to break away in many ways from certain ways, certain cultural expectations, because I did not want to raise my child like that. I made a decision that I brought this child into the world. I must make sure that I raise my child a certain way. So when they were saying you must put the king harmans on the forehead to protect the child, I had to stand my ground and say no. This child is dedicated to Jesus, you know, and that came with its own isolation.
Of course.
All right, because extended family will do this. Oh, you know better and whatnot. And it wasn't I know better, it was I'm choosing better. Right? I'm choosing that this is the way that I'm going to raise my child. So yeah, so you're contending with society's way of raising children. And even now, I can't even say I have it 100%. You know, she's a teenager now. So but I mean, I've learned to prepare for my child's milestones within 7 year periods, right? So 0 to 7, I'm a different type of parent. You know, I'm more autocratic. Do this, do that. You know, this is what a child does and whatnot. 7 to 14, I can't be that parent, right? I can't be an autocratic parent. I have to find the balance between autocracy and being a friend, right? Because this child is growing into a mini young woman, right? So I have to teach her certain things, prepare her for certain milestones like her period, etc., and whatnot. And then from 14 to 21, she's making life decisions, right? She's deciding on what she's going to be in life, what she's going to study for. You know, within this period, she'll finish matric, one of the milestones, right? She'll go to varsity, one of the milestones. She'll probably meet a guy, date for the first time, one of the milestones. So I've learned to prepare her in 7 year stages, just to know that, okay, now she's in the stage and this is what I need to be. And therefore, my parenting needs to change, right? It needs to change with each and every 7 year milestone. I can't be autocratic. And this is what a lot of parents do not understand. Well, a lot of parents think you are 0 to 7 years old for the rest of your life, and they can just say, do this, do that, do this, do that, and you must just obey. No, there comes a time in a child's life where they are an adult, and God requires from them certain choices, right, and accountability, and he no longer requires from us. So we can't force our children to do this and that because we are violating their very ability given by God to choose at a certain stage, right? Because God will hold them accountable. So there's a period in parenting where you become supervisory in your role, right? You no longer you no longer can dictate, and you're not really friend at that time. So you have to be you have to function in a supervisory capacity, and this is where you trust that what you've instilled in the child will blossom or will bloom, right? And you still are guiding them, but you're guiding them as you would guide an adult, right? You're not guiding them as you would guide a little 4 year old. And you give them room to make decisions for themselves, even if those decisions are contrary to you, right? Because it's an adult now.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was great. So, do you find there's a term that people like to say that you should reparent yourself the way that you would have loved to be parented? Do you think it works, or there is a concept like that?
I think it's very important. It's a concept that I did not even know was a concept out there, but it's a concept that spoke to my heart when my daughter was 3 years old, because I remember looking at her and thinking, my goodness, this is how old I was when my mom died in front of my eyes. This is how old I was when my dad, who killed my mom, left us, right? So I remember just looking at her and seeing how small she was, because I think sometimes when things happen to you, you don't have the accurate perception of just how old and vulnerable you were when that was happening. You know, people speak about, oh, I was raped when I was 3 years old. And I don't think you accurately understand how small and vulnerable you were until you see an actual 3-year-old. And so that happened for me when I saw my little girl and she was 3. And when I tell you, that woke me up to reparenting myself, and I remember just thinking, what is it that I would have loved to receive when I was young, right? I would have loved to receive hugs. I would have loved to be told I'm pretty. I would have loved to be told I'm smart, to be validated, right? But then I realized God, in His awesome wisdom, gave that to me through people, right? People that weren't necessarily even related to me, but they validated certain things. But just watching my child also makes me realize just how much God loves me. That God kept me, regardless of what was happening in my life. God kept me. God protected me, even from my own self. He protected me. So the reparenting concept, I know is spoken of as you really reparenting yourself, but I had to first be reparented by God, right? And He had to give me then models that are parents according to His heart. And those people loved me and nurtured me and cared for me, and then I cared for myself from that place.
You speak a lot about your faith. Do you think part of parenting is instilling values from faith? Like maybe 50% of our values come from our belief systems, faith, and ethics.
Yeah. Look, I don't think there's anything that functions outside of a certain mindset, values and ethics, and you certainly don't build anything outside of values and ethics. So yes, definitely my life, my entire life is revolving around Jesus, right? And the faith of Christianity, according to the Word of God. But I also want to say, I've seen the principles of God will work whether you believe in Jesus or not, right? They will work because the reality is that there are people that are using God's principles and they want to have nothing to do with Jesus, right? But they will be kind, they will be loyal, they will have self control, and they will parent their children in a loving way, right? Even with the co parenting space, I said to when Nuklunga and I were debating on whether we should write the book or not, right? And whether we should tell our story. The clincher for us, or rather the deciding factor for us, was the fact that this story has been told of co-parenting and blended families. I mean, look at people like Abo Jada Pinkett Smith, look at people like Abo Alicia Keys. So there are people that are co-parenting, but they're not really interested in Jesus. They serve Buddha, they serve whatever and whatnot. But they have managed to take the principles of God and work with them, right? So, whereas in my life, the reason this for me works is because I am rooted in a person called Jesus. So this is why I do everything. This is when I pursue peace. I pursue peace because He's the Prince of Peace and says we must pursue peace, right? So I'm not pursuing peace for the sake of just pursuing peace. There's a person behind what I am pursuing. But these principles, like I said, they're universal. People can take them and apply them. I've seen people take the principle even of giving, right? I mean, we look at people like Oprah who have lived on the principle of just give thanksgiving, gratitude. And we see the scripture being fulfilled because the Bible speaks about if you are grateful and if you are giving, good measure, pressed down, shaken together, will come over to you. You will increase, you will not diminish. So those principles work, but in my case, they work because of Jesus. And I always want to put that up front because I don't want anyone thinking this in my life has been because of my wisdom or anyone's wisdom. It's Jesus.
Wow. You you've explained partly, but I want to know, what is intentional parenting to you and in this generation, and what do you teach others? The effort that you need to put into being to be an intentional parent. What do you think is intentional parenting?
Intentional parenting for me starts with acknowledging that the scripts that are currently available are not 100% correct. Because if you don't first interrogate that, right, if you don't interrogate the scripts, that means you are just following a pattern. And by the fourth generation, this thing is normal. And nobody's asking questions of, hello, this thing, why are we putting Inkaba Yabantwana in the ground? Right? Why are we putting Armands on the Ifokotolomdwana? I don't know what it's called in English. You know, why are children seen and not heard? Right? So you have to interrogate parenting as it currently exists, right? And I think you must interrogate parenting before you become a parent yourself, right? There's grace for after you've had the child, but I would say in this generation, the people that have not had children yet, please question the current parenting and look at it from the lens of, is it producing functional human beings, right? Functional human beings that you can take from baby stage up until where they themselves have their own families. And I can tell you, one of the spaces that I'm really passionate about is the space of marriage. I can tell you, based on just the work that I do with couples, I can tell you most of the issues in their marriage have to do with childhood. They have to do with childhood. So you find this girl that's been groomed all her life to be a wife. And from the time she was growing up at home, she was told that, no, umfazi akalali or intombazana ayilali kude kuvele ilanga, right? Sure. You must go sweep, you must go you must make sure the curtains are closed at a certain time. Don't. The boy, nothing. Sit there, do your thing, my boy. What do you want? Do you want porridge? Oh, I'll bring you porridge, my boy. Do you want this? Your sister, come, serve your brother, right? And that kind of parenting did not prepare the couples that are currently in marriages for an evolved reality, right? Because when those girls and those boys were being reared, right, they were being reared at a different time. And that time was not preparing them for the current reality where women are emancipated, where women work outside of the home, right? And where men sometimes are struggling to find work, and then women are predominantly breadwinners. So it did not prepare us for the realities that we are in. So when you intentionally parent, interrogate the script, the parenting script as a whole. Make a decision on what kind of parent you want to be in future or currently. One of the things I had to be intentional about was apologizing to my daughter, because when my daughter was born, so I was deep into the script of parenting as I see it around me, right? And I would, like, if she messes up, I would hit her little bum, and I would feel horrible about that. Like, why am I hitting the child? What principle am I teaching this child? I'm teaching this child that if I disagree with you, I'm going to, for you to understand me, I'm going to have to hit you. Am I not preparing that child for an abusive relationship? Yes. Eventually, ultimately, right? Because she's busy forming, and she's forming an opinion that, for me to even voice out how I feel, or for me not, or for me to make a mistake. If I make a mistake, I'm going to be hit. So the same hand that loves is the same hand that wounds, right? So, and then I realized, no. That's not the messaging I want to give to my child. And that's why I feel horrible about it. And I remember sitting down with her. She was about 4 or 5 years old. And I said to her, call a chicken pie. I said, chicken, I am so sorry, for hitting you. I shouldn't have hit you when you don't understand me, or I haven't said something to you, or you haven't done the right thing. I shouldn't hit you. I should talk to you, right? Because I don't hit other people outside of my home when they don't understand me. I avoid them. I have a discussion with them, but I don't beat them. Why am I beating my child to get a point across? Right. So I said to her, I'm sorry about it. Right. And going forward, I will never do it again, you know. And but also gonna need you to help me by being a listening child. So if I say this, I don't want to say it like 3 times. If I say it, you go do it now, right? And I said to her, I've never been a mom, so I don't know how this works. And we laughed because she said to me, yeah, but I'm also a child. I've never been a child, so I also don't know how it works. And I got it in that moment that it's true. She also doesn't know what she's doing. I also don't know what I'm doing. So let's just give each other some mercy, right? And then I had that conversation with her. And it was touch and go in the beginning because, we're trying to find a new way of being. But we were both committed to the new way of being. And so eventually we fell into the space of just having honest conversations. And, yesterday she said to me, she said to me, I love you so much, Mom. You're such a great mom. And I said, oh, I went and hugged her because I just felt like, whoa, guys, to be loved by your teenager in this day and age, it's a flex, So I said to her, thank you so much, because to be loved by your teenager in this day and age is something else. Because we are raising you guys in tough times. We have to contend with technology. We have to contend with human trafficking. We have to contend with a lot of things that were not part of our childhood. So we are growing with you as you are growing up. So it's important to intentionally parent, look at what's happening with children in society. What are the conversations that are being had? Right? One of the teenagers that came for coaching last week at my home, him and his sister, and I can't remember what I said, and he was like, you know our lingo, you speak our lingo. I've got a teenager, so I have to be aware of what you guys are saying. You guys have different phrases that you are using amongst one another, and because my child is open with me, I've cultivated that atmosphere intentionally because I don't want to raise a child that will be afraid to ask me anything. I said to her, you will never be punished for the truth, but you will be punished for lies. That's the only thing you'll be punished for. But the truth, even if the truth is like scary, ask, speak the truth. That we won't punish you for, And it's something that we've had to be consistent in. That truly, when you come with the truth, even when it makes you uncomfortable, because some of the questions that they come with, they make you uncomfortable. Mom, what is a BJ? Mom, what is it's like, oh, bow. Now I have to explain this thing, and explain it in an age appropriate language as well, because you also don't want to give too much information and really corrupt the child's mind, but you have to be intentional. And so there's the foresight of being intentional, right? Where you can see certain things, but then there's the real life happening situations where you have to intentionally parent in that moment, where you have to even help yourself not to scream, not to shout, but to have a proper conversation with your child. So intentional parenting all the way. Interrogate what you've learned and also apply that which feels true to you, right? Because and like, for instance, let me go back to the example of putting harmans on the child's forehead. When I was told that, I don't think the person that told me was being necessarily malicious. I think that's their way of knowing how to deal with babies.
Yes.
That's how they were taught, and that's what they really firmly believe in. But I had to be true to what I was feeling at the time. That I don't think I want to do this thing on my child. I feel like I want to dedicate my child to Jesus and believe that it is Jesus that protects my child, you know, and have the courage to fulfill your decisions, because sometimes we don't have the courage to fulfill our decisions, because when pushback comes, it's like, okay, let me just do it for the sake of granny or for the sake of mang. And sometimes the family wants to name the child a name that you don't like, and it's your child. You are responsible for that child. You know, it's not your family's child. Yes, it's a child that belongs to the family, but it's your child. You have the first and the last say over your child. And sometimes we have to have the courage of our convictions to stand on our convictions, even if everyone is saying this is how it's done. If you, in your heart, you sense that I really want to do this thing differently, you must make the decision and you must have the courage to stand by it.
Do you find that the structures that we've learned, the old parenting style and the new parenting style, sometimes clash because teenagers in this day and age, they prefer conversation more than confrontation. Do you find that confrontation does not work as much as conversation? Because, you know, our parents were like, yeah, if they're going to address something like you are going on your periods and maybe you were scared, and then they shout instead of
Yeah, it's
let
because
me
you.
conversate. Yeah. I remember my when I started my period, it was very, very traumatic. They were like, when's in? When's in?
Me
Instead of,
too.
oh my God, it has happened. I've
Yeah.
not had the conversation. But with my 12-year-old, I was like, be ready, be ready. And it has happened, and we had a conversation.
Yeah.
But why do we find like it's a failure? We are quick to be confrontational.
Look, I think for us to evaluate whether something is good or not, we must look at the results, right? We must look at the fruit thereof. Is conversation working, and was confrontation working? Many will say, my parents beat me and I am
I'm
okay
okay. They like to
as a
say that.
result
Are
of
we
it.
okay?
And are you okay, really? Like, look, if we have to interrogate you and the kind of decisions that you make, the kind of emotional decisions that you make, even, are you really okay? You know, or are you premising your okayness on, oh, and then I became a solid accountant and I became a doctor, you know? Or are you actually premising it on, I'm really a holistic human being and I know how to deal functionally with relationships? Because many times when I don't know of anyone who was screamed at who has a functional relationship today, right? Anyone who was invalidated, whose feelings were invalidated, who has a functional relationship today. I don't know of any boy that was brought up believing that a boy does not cry, who has a proper relationship with women today, right? So if we're going to say, confrontational versus conversational, I think both of them have their weaknesses, right? And confrontation gets a lot of slack with people, and I think confrontation is necessary with any relationship. But the problem is we think confrontation is war, right? We think everything must be war, everything must be verbal, everything must be physical and violent for you to get the point across. It's almost like I'm going to hit respect into you. I want you to respect me, but I'm going to disrespect you to the core for you to respect me. And that's what we've made confrontation, right? That I must, for someone to really revere me and respect me, I must bully them with disrespect and then they will respect me. And it's like,
Doesn't work.
how does that work, right? And if we look at, has it been fruitful? What has it done for people in their evolving into parents themselves, into husbands, into wives? I see a lot of damage. I don't see a lot of functionality in marriages, even in our parenting. And then there's us with the conversationalists, right? Which is great, but I think the flaw in the conversations is that we think in us being conversationalists, we must defer our authority, right? So we must defer our authority to the kids. So you find conversationalists who are really scared of their children because their children have taken over the authority. So the trick is to find the balance, right? And I always say to my girl, I'm your mom first. You know, there are times where I'm friendly with you and it looks like I'm your friend, but never forget that I'm your mom. You know, sometimes we'll be laughing together, "Kwa, kwa, kwa, kwa," and then she'll say something. I'm like, hey, you don't speak to your mother like that. I'm your mom, right? So it's always the finding the balance of letting the child know that I'm an authority, but I'm a loving authority. I'm supposed to guide you into a certain space, and I will guide you with your help, right? And with God's help, with love. But I'm not going to just let you be. You know, the other time she was saying to me, some of her friends say I'm strict. And I said to her, tell your friends I'm not strict, I'm responsible. And if I was strict, I would let, she was laughing. And I said to her, if I was strict, I would let you wear only long dresses. You know, you wouldn't go anywhere. You wouldn't do nothing. You know, you would wake up at 5 even when you're not going to school. If I was strict, but I'm not strict, I'm responsible. So I know when to say yes and I know when to say no. And maybe for them, the fact that sometimes I say no, it's equals to she's strict. And if that's the definition, then I'm okay with it because I understand what I have to protect my child from. And I understand her outcome ultimately. What kind of adult do I want her to be?
You. Why are most parents having a fit when raising teens, or they feel like they need to be in absolute control instead of, as you said, having an open plan and conversating and being open about things? For example, sex education. Why do they think that the child must know what is happening and the conversation needs to happen from them first? Because school will say you're supposed to be you're supposed to be having these conversations. Yeah.
Look, I think first of all, it's uncomfortable for us, right? Because it's not a lot of us that were also taken through this properly, right? Where we were taught the birds and the bees. The many of the things that we know, even about sex, we learned from school, and we learned through fumbling in relationships that we were not supposed to be in, right? So I think the we are uncomfortable with having certain conversations with our children. But I believe that you must have the conversation even if you are uncomfortable. And tell the child, I'm uncomfortable. I really am. That for me, that's how you break the ice. So that the child doesn't feel like you are coming with this interrogation, right? You say to the child, listen, there's a conversation we have to have, and I'm uncomfortable because I don't even know where to start because also it didn't happen with me. But I'm going to try and explain it in the best possible way that I can. So there's a bird, there's a bee, and this is what happens when they, you know. And chances are, by the time you have that conversation with teenagers, right, they've already either they've engaged in sexual relations that you don't know of. I mean, I was shocked at the amount of times my daughter would come home when she was 12 and she would say, Ban Ban is dating who, and she's feeling the pressure. And I'm like, 12 years old.
You have no idea.
No, I was shocked. 12 years old, right? And what does a 12-year-old know about themselves? And I had to explain to my child that you have no idea who you are. You don't even know your favorite color. Let's just stand there. Sitting there hours. You don't even know your favorite color. What are you going to do with a boy? And the thing is, during that time, all that surging between the two of you are hormonals, right? Your hormones are raging, and you will end up having something that you are physically prepared for, but you are emotionally, mentally, and spiritually and financially not ready for. So, and also to have that conversation with your teenager, it's late. It's a conversation that you must have with your child as soon as they are able to comprehend, even when they are 2 years old, 3 years old. One of the things I was intentional about with my daughter was to tell her about her sexual organs, right? And tell her from a young age who's allowed to touch and who's not allowed to touch. That's where sexual education starts. It doesn't start when they are 15 years old. It's a bit late when you get to that stage, right? You teach the child in a child appropriate language, of course. That they don't touch this, mommy. Ne? Mommy doesn't touch this. Daddy doesn't touch this. The only time mommy touches here is when mommy washes. And that's it, right? This is yours. It's God, it's what God has given you. You must protect it, right? And sometimes there are mummies and daddies that do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? If that ever happens to you, you must never be quiet. You must bite, you must whatever, you must, and you must speak. So I taught her those things from a young age. And it was heartbreaking to have to teach my 3-year-old, 4-year-old that there's a possibility of rape in this world.
That's true.
Right? And the possibility of rape can come even from your father. It's not something that's out there lurking in the shadows. It can even happen around here. So I had to teach her that. And so I've come with her from the age of 3, then introducing something else as a conversation to a point where now when I talk about it, it's like, oh, mom, we know, both she and her brother go, mom, we know you've told us 100 times, yes, and I say to them, I have to, like, it's like something that has to be recurring. I have to tell you the truth all the time. And when there's new developments about anything, it's me and them. Teachable, they know, Thandi, teachable moments. I always say, teachable moments. So, this is what's happening in the world. This is what I've just discovered. And this is how to protect yourself, all right? So, it's if you're starting now because you realize how important it is to talk to your children, it's okay. Get the help if you need the help. Get a mediator to sit in. Get a coach if you need a coach to sit in. Get a friend if you need a friend to sit in the conversation, or dad or whatever. But it has to happen. It's not something that you can blind yourself to and just put your head under the sand. It has to happen. And you'd rather that conversation happens with you than for that conversation to happen with their peers, because it's the blind leading the blind. They are all trying to figure it out. And so imagine the 12-year-old is also teaching the 12-year-old about sex. It's the blind leading the blind. So you'd rather they hear it from you.
Why the secrecy though amongst black? Like such things are a secret. Like
A taboo.
you do, yeah, taboo. I remember I was teaching it it was back in 2006, like you said, teaching her that you should not touch here, and this can happen with anyone, like even with your uncle that you like, this can happen. And this day and age, even women, there are women who love other women, so it's normal. And my mom was like, "Hey, mncane, she's still young." It happens. You find that somebody was raped at the age of 8, 6, and they have the courage to speak at the age of 30. Had they understood that my mom said this is wrong, so why the uncomfortability and the taboo? Like she'll find her way, or he'll find his way.
It's a passed down tradition of secrecy. You know, if your mom was secretive about it, how it also informs how you raise your daughter if you don't change, right? So that's why I said we have to require of ourselves to be better than how our parents were, and also understand that our parents were because their parents were. You know, it was a culture that was passed down that these things are secretive, right? I think they confused the sacredness of sex with secrecy, right? Because sex is sacred. And when you teach it from a place of sacredness. But they felt that sacredness is secrecy. And so as a result, their secrecy caused a host of people, many in this generation, to be raped by family members. And because Angithi, when we were growing up as black people, like it's like uncle lives with us, uncle's uncle or uncle's child lives with us as well. So when we're sleeping, we're all sleeping here in the same room, right? And so it also fosters a culture of familiarity with each other's bodies. And so eventually you're not even sure if this is the right thing or not, because uncle is family. So we're not talking about these things. We and this thing is secret, right, from your parents. So your uncle can also say it's a secret between us, right? Because he takes the culture and does wicked things to you and then covers it up with a secrecy that you already know exists, right? So it's a passed down legacy of secrecy, unfortunately, and just not being comfortable with sexuality as a gift from God. And I mean, the secrecy is even in the church, you know, that a place where we're supposed to be talking openly and honestly about sex with our teens. It's like no. It's like even when you talk about sex, it's almost like you are carnal.
I don't
It's
think
like,
I've
"Aibo,
ever heard a pastor speaking about sex
it's
in a
like,
youth service.
what is this one bringing into the church? You know, the spirit of carnality. And it's like the church is the hope of the world. If it's not happening at home, you know, if these discussions are not happening at home, they should be happening at church at least to lead and guide the children properly in the ways of God, you know, and speak about sex as something that is celebratory, that you're looking forward to at the right time with the right person in the right context. So because we don't even know that, do you know, I always say to my friends and my community that I lead, I always say, you know, I feel like we must just stop church one day and just ask the following: how many women here have had an orgasm in their marriage? I always say that.
Oh
I
my
always say,
God.
because you see, like it's already like you're taken aback by it, right? Because the amount of women that have never even had an orgasm is astounding, even in church. So we are saying, we are sitting there and we are praying for everything, and we're not praying for the sexual relationship, right? We're not talking about this is how a woman climaxes, because it's literally the same way for every woman. This is how a woman climaxes, right? So and so that secrecy concerning sex as children is now affecting
The marriage.
marriages where we're not even having great sex, right? You see how the whole thread ultimately causes chaos in the family of your choosing, right? If the family of your origin doesn't do it the right way, if they don't teach you the right way, if they're not intentional about parenting you, you become a problem in all ways. If they don't teach you about finances, you become a problem
That's true.
financially. If they don't teach you on how to handle your emotions, you become a problem emotionally. If there's a deficiency in the knowledge that you have concerning good sex, appropriate sex, your wife is crying and she's hearing everybody talk about orgasms and she can't even say because she's feeling ashamed that I don't think I know what you guys are talking about, right? So if the family has not been able to do that, I feel the church should be like the midwife that grabs the child, right, and midwives the child to full functional adulthood and eventually a thriving family.
I have a question. I have 3 questions, but I don't want to answer this one coming up in my mind. The first time I heard of planning, as you're saying, sex, financial planning, property was from my youth pastor at the age of 90
Sure.
when I already had a child.
Sure.
So, what do you think should be the role that we play as the church, number one? And number two, why do you think parents see that as a failure that, oh, the pastor had to teach her about property and planning? And why do we as black parents feel like, failile? Why angakwazi ukumamela wena? Ayumamela umuntu wangaphandle?
Look, the reality is that we were raised by parents who were deficient in knowledge themselves, right? And so then we got grabbed by our youth pastors and they acted like the midwives that the church is supposed to be. You know, the church for me is supposed to be such a viable organism in the community that if the family is thriving, great. But we know that many families are not thriving. So it's supposed to be the one that catches the child, that catches the vulnerable ones of society when they are thrown in there. So the church, for me, has to be one of the most highly informative organisms. We can't afford to be, the parents are secretive about sex. We are also secretive about sex, right? The parents are secretive or they don't know about proper financial management. We also don't know. All we know is that we must tithe, we must offer, but we don't know what we must do with the 90%, right? So the body of Christ is supposed to be such a living organism that it literally midwives every area of society that is dysfunctional. So if we find a dysfunctional marriage, we're supposed to be able to midwife it back to life. And if we find a child who's had rejection issues, etc., we must be able to midwife that child to healing. Right? And so on and so forth for every really area of life that needs midwifery. But I mean, yeah, I don't want to say much on it in terms of the church. I could say a lot. But I mean, the Lord is raising up, I believe, those kind of leaders that are supposed to be in the churches. And it doesn't mean that they were not in the church previously, but they were not as many as they ought to have been, because the church was focused on other things that it was not supposed to be focused on. But we're supposed to introduce the life of God in reality, in practicality, to the communities that we live in. And that doesn't translate to be at church every Sunday. And that's good to be at church on Sundays. But beyond the Sunday experience, Monday, I'm supposed to be able to be so equipped that I'm able to help someone who needs financial management or someone that needs healing. Or if I can't help, I'm supposed to be able to easily direct that person to someone that can in the church.
Wow.
Right. So yeah, I think also we must take up the calling of Christ. You know, the calling of Christ is go into all the world and make disciples of all nations. Making disciples is not bringing people to church. Making disciples is accurately teaching and inspiring and motivating someone's life to change to align to the pattern of Christ, right? And when your life is aligned to the pattern of Christ, it affects every area of your life. Your finances, how you deal with your emotions, how you parent your children, how you show up in your marriage, how you show up as a friend. It affects everything. All right. Yeah.
Oh. So going into marriage, why do you think as a society we place marriage in such a high value? Like it's such a pedestal that as long as you are married, you can parent well. Like you'll be fine. I remember after I had my child, they'd be like, you'll meet someone and you'll get married and everything will be fine.
Yeah.
Like, why do we have that perception that marriage produces the best results or the best parenting results?
I think we have that perception because God has that perception, right? God created marriage, and at its highest functional space, marriage is supposed to do that. It's supposed to produce greatness. Sorry, greatness not only in husband and wife, but in the children that are raised in the family. That's God's desire, right? And it's an achievement because it is God's it is God's way of producing functioning societies, right? At least that was his intention. But because, human beings are human beings, we've made a mess and a mockery even of that institution on so many levels. Um, you know, and I used to hear, I was a single mom of two, with two different guys. So I was told a lot of things. Even my ability to parent and parent well was questioned by people that were in marriages that I could tell were highly dysfunctional marriages. Because you are forever screaming at your husband and in front of your children, and you are judging me, who is single and is raising my child in a peaceful way, in a peaceful environment. But it goes back to that thing where a lot of women were taught to value marriage and to, like, when I'm married, I have achieved, right? Versus men, they don't think it's an achievement, right? But it works. It's a good space for men. I think marriage currently benefits men more than it benefits women. And I think God's way was this thing is supposed to benefit not only men, but women, child, society at large, even governments. Right. So that was God's thinking. So the way we are doing marriage right now is not glorifying God. And we've got nothing to really say is an achievement about, unless we align it to the thoughts and the intentions of God for it. Right. And I want to say, especially to single moms, that, man, I've seen single moms that are amazing parents. Like that really, and single dads that are amazing parents. I mean, the father of my son is an amazing parent. And he's not married yet, but he's got someone in his life. But I mean, even before she came to the party, he was an amazing parent, intentionally so. So I don't think that your marital status must inform how you parent. Unfortunately, it does for many people, but it shouldn't. because there's a lot of single married moms, and
That's true.
we are married, but I'm the one that's raising this child or these children. You literally just come in and out as you please, but I'm actually the parent. So it's not an indication of whether your child will turn out well. And in fact, for many children, they don't turn out well in these kind of spaces where people are just sitting together for the sake of the children. Because if you're just doing it for the sake of the children, you're not doing it for the sake of the entire family. And you are not prioritizing your healing. You're prioritizing these children seeing a version of a family that actually really no longer exists, right? And that wounds the children in the long run, because children are not stupid. They see things. They hear you when you guys are fighting. They see you when you're not talking to one another, right? So it's not an indication. So I want to really say to each and every person who's intentionally parenting their child as a single dad or single mom, kudos to you. Do what needs to be done. Get a supportive structure around you to help raise this child. But you're doing great, and your child would not have been better off. You don't know that, right? You don't know whether your child would have been better off had you married the father of your child, because there are other people that are just parents biologically, right? And that have nothing, that shouldn't have no business being parents,
That's true.
right? And unfortunately, it is what it is, and it doesn't mean that every child must be. I believe in co-parenting, but I don't believe all parents should co-parent because there are parents that are dangerous and so damaged that if you try and co-parent with them, you are literally putting your child and your life in danger. Right. So I don't believe in co-parenting at any cost. Right. So, but I mean, with regards to families, there are emerging families right now that I see, young couples that are really loving God, loving each other, loving their children, and trying their best to raise these children in healthy environments. And I say kudos to them. But I also say it's a drop in the ocean. We need to be more that are arising and raising our children in the institution that God wanted our children to be raised in. Yeah.
Yeah. Before we wrap up, what are some of the, how can I word this question? There's a saying that always says that parenting is a reflection of what we give towards our kids. For an example, what I loved about my mom was the service that she had, and I'm now instilling in my child, like serving her food, dishing her up and serving her food, and I'm seeing her she does to other people. Like I believe that parenting is having the spirit of service, same as marriage. Do you think that would work? To instill those smaller nyana things, like instilling giving, for an example, instilling those values of giving, whether it's your time, your service. Yeah.
I think, yes, it would. And here's where I think it would start from. I think it should start from understanding that you're not raising a child, you're raising an adult who starts off as a child. So if you've got a perception of that in your mind, that I'm not raising this little pequenini here, I'm actually raising an adult, right? But the adult has come in the form of a child. And to have a clear goal of what this adult must look like, right? That if I'm raising an adult, I understand that I can't make a decision for them in terms of what they should be in life, right? Vocationally. Like I can't decide that they must be a doctor or a sports person or whatever. But I can rear them in such a way that they are a great person. Whether they are a doctor, whether they're a sportsman, whether they are a swimmer, whatever they are, right? The human being at their core must have the following values. They must be kind, right? They must love, they must serve, they must have self control, they must be diligent, they must be excellent. So if you put up that table of values concerning the core person that you are co creating with God, right? And with your partner, if you have a partner, or with your support structure, if you've got a support structure, if you put that as a goal, then you can't be shouting at the child and say, I'm raising a kind child. How? Right? Then it has to confront how you show up. Right? And how you show up mainly should be of service and mainly should be of demonstrating that service to the child and to the people around you. Right? That the child must see demonstrated this is what kindness looks like. This is what loyalty looks like. This is what integrity with your word looks like. All right. So you have to show up as that. And that means you have to be clear on how you are going to serve. But you must first be clear on the adult that you want to raise.
Wow. So, what would you say to advising parents who feel like they've instilled value, they have done what they needed to do, but they've not found the outcome? Where your society that loves results, like I did this, I did that, but it didn't work out. I did this, I did that with the father of my child, but I end up being divorced. What do you say to those people?
Yeah, look, I always say the Bible says that raise up a child in the way they should go. And in the long run, they won't forget about it. So you can say, I want this person to be like this, right? And pour into this person, whether it's a romantic relationship or a child. You're pouring because there's an outcome, right? And sometimes children, because they grow up to be an adult, right, make a decision that I don't want to do this thing that my mom was doing, right? Maybe my mom was a Christian. I don't want to be a Christian. I want to be something else. You have to trust, or rather, I trust in the word of God being true, that I've raised you up in the way that you should go. And the Bible says you will not forget it. So I have to trust that that is true and that you will not forget it. You will not forget being kind. You won't forget God. Even when you make a certain decision against God, you will not forget God. And I've seen so many testimonies that are like that, where the child went astray and decided, I don't want to be a preacher's kid, done enough, and they go squander the inheritance like the boy
prodigal son.
the prodigal son, right? But then, like any prodigal son, they remember. They remember that I'm not supposed to be eating with pigs. I've got a dad, right? And values instilled are the same as for instance, I was saying yesterday when I was teaching God's word, I was saying nobody tells me what 7 times 7 is. Right? 7 times 7 is 49. How do I know that? I know that because when I was in primary school, every day before I start anything, I had to do timetables, 1 till 10, right? 1 times 1, 2 times, 3 times. I know all of those until 10. You can wake me up at 3 a.m. and say, what is 7 times 7? I'll say it's 49. I don't need to think about it. It's encoded in me. It's inside me. And I don't work with numbers on a daily basis for me to remember that 7 times 7 is 49. It's the same with values instilled, right? You can try and be whatever, but you will remember the value that has been instilled and that has been instilled consistently, And in the case of maybe the divorce happened, my reality or my thinking around these things are my job is to serve, right? Whether you take the service or appreciate the service or reciprocate the service has got nothing to do with me. I'm accountable to God first and to myself about what kind of person I'm going to show up as. If you decide that I'm a fool for showing up as a kind person, you've chosen that this is where the journey ends for you and I. And in service, I believe you lose nothing. I really believe you lose nothing. If you didn't gain the person or you didn't gain the finances, you gained the lesson. And so carry on serving, carry on being who you are. You know, even with your child, carry on having made a decision that I want my child to be a kind child. I want them to be smart. If I want them to be smart, I must get them to read. You know, I must get them to watch certain sermons or teachings or whatever, right? I must get them into environments that challenge them and cause them to ask questions. So if I've done all of that, I am comfortable with God. My work is done.
Wow.
Over to you, God.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay, last advice for teenagers, young adults who are struggling with their parents. First, an adult who's struggling, teenagers who are struggling with their parents, and an adult who is stuck in the body of a 3-year-old, 8-year-old, around experiences that they could not change and situations that they could not change. Yeah.
So I speak to this
Yes.
camera. So to an adult like that, right, who's been wounded and really wounded, first of all, sorry about that. Secondly, you know, I don't believe in secondary victimization. By that I mean I don't believe in being a victim the one time when the thing happened, and then I'm a victim perpetually because it's playing itself in my mind and my emotions. And the most important thing is I know how to deal with my mind and I know how to deal with my emotions. And all of us have had something. If we were to really sit with one another in a room, we've got stories to tell for days, right? But I would encourage you to really go and find healing, source out healing, whether it's a church, whether it's with a psychologist, any professional that's in the mental health space. You know, invest in yourself. We invest in so many things but our mental health, and yet that is the part that is causing a lot of chaos in our lives, right? Invest in yourself. And also, you are like a tree. You literally can uproot yourself. You don't have to be stuck in something that happened when you were 3 years old or when you were 5 years old. If you live with that perpetually and you do nothing about it, you are essentially saying that those people must take over your life for the rest of your life. And I refuse to be like that. I refuse to live a life like that. So refuse to live a life where your power is taken and is taken. It was taken at 3 years old and it's still being taken at 35 years old. And I want to say to teenagers, you know, teenagers that don't have maybe good parents or parents that do not know how to relate to you, right? Find someone in the community who is like that. Find, even if it's not in the community, find someone maybe that you can look up to as a role model. Sometimes your mentor can be someone that you see on TV, right? They've got good, solid foundations, good, solid moral behavior. Follow those people. Make a decision to be like those people, but find someone also in your community that you can speak to, whether it's a teacher, whether it's a social worker, whether it's a granny, you know, who likes you in the community. Have conversations with them.
Wow. Thank you so much, Thandi. That was insightful. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for sharing your story. Thank you for sharing your wisdom. I wish you all the best. I know that you're a published author. So if anyone wants your book, I know you're available on all social platforms.
Yes.
And we'll edit when we are editing.
Yes.
So I thank you for coming.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Viewers, thank you so much for joining us. This conversation was insightful. I know that someone was helped. Thank you to Sense Studios for hosting us. We thank you also for sponsoring our water. We'll see you on the next one.